Hello and welcome to the Fire Officer Project podcast, a show where we will discuss and learn together about topics specific to the American Fire Service. Come along as we explore areas such as firehouse traditions and culture, the fire family life, leadership, as well as getting yourself ready to be the company officer. This show is for everyone from the rookie firefighter to newly promoted officers. I'm your host, Mark McCurdy. Now let's get on with the show. Before you listen to this episode, I'm going to inject this little piece. I realized after listening to the episode before I put it out, I usually go back and just make sure I didn't say anything too stupid or that sounded too ridiculous. I realized that most of the episode was focused on a little bit of history and lessons learned, but I really didn't focus too much on what we actually did during the Eaton fire. And I just wanted to say that the crew I was with was a collection of all three shifts of my current station, which goes to show that the crews all work so well together that we can just have whatever members moved around, which is pretty common. And we could work seamlessly in one of these most stressful, high-stress situations. So Chad and Cody, you know who you are. Thanks for all that hard work that night. We learned a lot. These guys just pushed through like so many others did. I mean, you're going to hear me talk about tier, and that'll get explained in the episode, where we're literally the only engine company on the street with multiple other hand crews from our department, stretching hose, trying to save houses that weren't impacted yet, prepping houses. I mean, we had multiple hand crews with us and an engine with 500 gallons of water. And we're just trying to get water shuttled to us, just making those stands as best we could. But you're going to hear in this episode some actions that we did, more so that we learned. I don't want to go too much. I've only posted one photo or a video from it because it's too specific. Like if somebody was to see it, they would know possibly that's our house. And I don't think that's the appropriate thing to do. You've seen videos all over YouTube. Whatever I put out there doesn't matter. Instagram, wherever you've seen it, there's just tons of videos. It's ultimate destruction. But you're going to hear some takeaways from here about lessons learned. The biggest part is the people that you're with and working with those crews and just seeing them push through. Not too often that you get to see these big incidents, thank goodness, especially at this gravity of this level of the Eaton fire, that you get to see what people are made of, basically. Not only are you challenging yourself, you're trying to watch out for your crew, they're trying to watch out for you, but you're hearing all this radio traffic, you're hearing familiar voices, you're in areas that you may grown up in, been around, familiar with, have ownership of, because that's your area that you work in, and you realize how much of an impact that has on you. This is a pretty destructive fire, and I like to almost basically a career fire that hopefully never happens again. Ultimately, we know this could, but it's one that you'll probably never forget, that you just can try to sit there and think, what could I have done better? What did we do well? Take those lessons and learn from them. And you just keep moving on. Keep telling these stories. Keep telling people what worked. Take things that you could say, oh, we could do this better. We need this piece of equipment, or maybe we should consider this. And working with other departments as well, trying to see what worked well and what we can improve on. So I just want to throw this little piece at the beginning, because after listening to it, like I said, I realized I really didn't talk too much other than the amount of fires that we were all experiencing, just from house to house to house. And if it gives you any idea of what we were dealing with, when we went on the third alarm, I had my wildland boots on, dressed to go to wildland fire. About 2:30 in the morning, I realized I haven't touched dirt yet. We're still on concrete and asphalt and just trying to save structures. So much so I changed my boots back to a different type of boot so that I could move a little quicker and wasn't getting my feet beat up with these boots with heels on them. That's just the environment that we were put in. And the amount of wind and just trying to move around and check in and do the best that you can really sets it apart from other incidents that we've been on. And within this time frame of this recording, there was another podcast that I like to listen to and was actually a guest on once. The Fire You Carry, with two guys from our work, Kevin and Noel. And they put out a great episode with a battalion chief that's on our job, Pete Finnerty, who you've probably seen pictures or know, but is one of my mentors. And he does a really good depiction because they really focus on kind of his area of what he did. And he does a great job of articulating that too. So I'll link it in the show notes as well for you to listen to that. And then maybe combining both of these and other influence or other stories that you hear, you can pick up some nuggets. So on with the show. Hello, welcome back to the Fire Officer Project. This is going to be episode 23. And yes, it has been a minute since I put anything out. I think it was May of last year was my last episode. Been a while. And then I've been kind of up and down with even posting and things like that. Well, I'm not going to bore you with all the first 10 minutes of excuses and reasons and everything. I'll give you a little brief overview to not just skip over. But I want to just get right into the subject matter. And then I can come back at another time and maybe delve into a couple of the things that happened over the past 10 months or so. But, life gets in the way. I wouldn't say gets in the way. It just happens. Vacations and lots of time at work, which I'm sure we all have a similar story. So my story is no different than yours. I'm literally just another person sitting in an office area at home, talking into a microphone, which records into a computer, putting down my thoughts. If I'm helping people, that's great. I've been getting a lot of positive feedback, which is good. But of course, when I stop putting out material, then the engagement drops as well. That's on me. So like I said, multiple vacations we got to go on, small little things here and there, which is great. Last summer was great. Got to go travel to Utah. Everything right now is wrapped around kids' sports. Both my girls just had a birthday here in January. They're now 12 and 14, which is crazy. So I had a lot of good time with that. And then, this thing kind of gets put on the back burner because of priority. I can't sit here and say, have, don't make this your identity and all this other things. But there are pieces I think that helps people to promote, or if you're already promoted, kind of some things to just consider. So that's why I do, but I can't do it as regularly. Hopefully I can. Now that I've kind of gotten back on track, I literally have the next 4 episodes written out, which is great. Just need to sit down and get it done. Story of everybody's life, I'm sure. But a couple things that I did really deal with that I want to mention, but not going to delve into now. I'm actually do a separate episode about it. Straight up, last summer into the fall, I dealt with some severe anxiety. I don't know where it came from. If any of you have ever suffered from this or experienced it, it's just a constant state of anxiety for no reason. I don't even have an understanding of why it happened, what was happening, but to explain what it was, I would get super anxious for hours. It would last for hours. Like I felt like my heart was racing, like the world was collapsing on me. And I didn't have some major event that happened that changed anything. I don't know if it was just a combination of things. Not sure. So dealt with that for months. And then it decided to take a turn and just go into straight depression. Pretty sucky, actually. So if you've dealt with that too, you just don't feel like doing anything. It's like you're just focusing as a shell daily to try to get through things. So I think I've mentioned it on here before. I see a therapist, or, there's multiple things that have happened in my life, and I'm sure everybody that's listening has that story. It just, for some reason, it finally caught up to me. So there was a lot of just trying to deal with that. And, that's past. I've done a bunch of sessions of therapy and trying to straighten things out and change things in my life to maybe keep that from happening again. And, that's it. I don't want to sit here and have a 10-minute monologue about woe is me and trying to catch you all up. Just letting you know that's kind of the couple things I was dealing with, and I'm working through it. And now I feel like I can get back on track and really jump into what I want to do with this, which is just put out some information on the side, help people that want to promote either over Zoom conferences, phone calls, in person, I'm still working through some of that, how that can work logistically. Our department just changed their whole process of promoting, so it kind of changed my ability to maybe be aware of who's trying to promote. And I don't really push this in my own department, so maybe I need to step it up a tiny bit and get a core group of people that can help. I'm not here to talk about what our department changed to. We're actually right in the midst of it. As of this recording, it's the first few days. They started on the 17th, this new group of captains. I put it in quotes because they're not promoted yet. It's just a new way of doing things. They have to prove themselves through a 6-week academy, Monday through Friday, multiple angles, and then there's a whole other process beyond that. But it kind of changed, so I need to kind of change how I'm going to do things and go from there. But as the title stated, we had a pretty significant firestorm. 2025 started out pretty darn rough here in Southern California. That's where I work. If you are local, I'm sure you are affected by it. I mean, I shouldn't even say local, out of state. We had tons of resources from out of state. I will not do it justice to try to thank everybody that came and helped, but if you're listening to this and you were part of that, thank you. Crazy experience. I'm sure you all have some crazy experiences. If you're listening to this and you were part of either the Palisades fire or the Eaton fire, or maybe you got moved around once you got here from out of state and you want to contact me, I'll leave all my information at the end. Or if you've been listening to this for a while, you know how to get a hold of me. We can just talk about your experiences. And we literally had people from out of the country, amongst out of state, helping us through these last 2 incidents. So a major start, that started January 7th. So within the first week of 2025, all hell broke loose. And that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about. But before I get too deep on this subject, I'm just going to explain to you, my company was assigned to the Eaton fire, my engine company. That's all I'm going to talk about. My experience only. As a disclaimer, I will not be commenting on any specific details, anything about an investigation, cause, anything of that nature. Not only do I feel that's not correct, but I'm under the direction of my own department. We're not to be mentioning anything. There's just too many angles that could influence or muddy up or just create false information, false ideas. If I started giving some my opinion or some details of something, because I saw a fraction. Our experience was a fraction of what was going on. So my whole intent with this is just to kind of put context into these major firestorms or these major incidents that happen, and how you as an individual, either as a promoted company officer or somebody that's looking to the future, or maybe you're not even in the fire service and you're listening to this, things that you can kind of be aware of what happens. So at the beginning here, I kind of just want to review a few major incidents we've had and kind of context for an understanding how big this incident was. Like I said, my company responded to the Eaton fire. I wasn't even on the Palisades fire. All these companies in Southern California and from around were affected by both of those 2 major fires, whether you were physically on the incident or were held at work for days on end, just to backfill stations, to increase coverage, all those things happening. Everybody fit in the piece somewhere. And I don't want to use the term fortunate, because that was a pretty crazy incident. The biggest thing is we have massive amount of houses that were lost, which impacts the public that we serve. And that doesn't go over well with the firemen. When people are losing their houses and their belongings and their lives, multiple fatalities on both ends, civilian fatalities, firefighters getting injured. We don't like that. It doesn't sit well with us. So I'm not going to even, like I said, comment on that stuff. I'm just going to give you the facts of the details that we experienced, some lessons learned, some things you can do to prepare yourself for those kind of incidents, and just things like that. So as I jump into it, I just want to give some context over some incidents. And these are fires that I wrote down. They're not by any means encompassing all fires. And then I'll give you a little bit of a setup on where we fit in the piece and where I feel like I can give a little bit of knowledge base just based on being put in the right place at the right time type attitude. So let me think here. These station, no, I wasn't. Okay. So some of these I was already promoted on and were on a couple of these incidents, but that's not relevant to what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about for data and understanding of details of what was recently experienced and then what has happened in the past. So just going over a few fires. The first one being the Thomas Fire. That started on December 4th, 2017. So December. If you think December, you should think wet, cold, out of fire season, but that doesn't happen here in Southern California. If we don't get the Santa Ana winds, which I'm not going to give a weather report or weather class on here, that's not my forte or anything, but to give you a context, they're dry wind. They're winds that come out of the north, northeast that shoot across, that push all the way across, down through mountain ranges, down through the whole areas, right? And it pushes and it basically goes out towards the ocean. So it's pushing from east to west, from northeast, north to west. And it's just those fires that we get that start inland or start somewhere and they push to the ocean. So we kind of state that we'll finally catch it when it gets to the ocean. It doesn't matter where it affects. It obviously, the way California is shaped, it affects the topography and the lay of the land in what area you're talking about. But for Los Angeles County and Los Angeles, it's supposed to be somewhat of a northeast wind that pushes east to the coast. And it's super dry, super windy, and it kind of builds up for days. And we actually do weather reports pretty much daily. That gives us data, and you can actually see trends where moisture is being sucked out. The pig probability of ignition increases, all these things happen, right? This is data collection in our morning report and in our lineup that we're talking about. And I'll get back into that. But the Thomas Fire started on December 4th, 2017. And this is just a rough Google search data collection of all the things I'm going to talk about. So they could be wrong, but just as somewhat of a context, it ended up burning approximately 282,000 acres. Thomas Fire destroyed 1,063 structures. We did have one firefighter fatality, Corey Iverson of CAL FIRE. And there was one civilian fatality as well. Now, there could be other data where civilians were injured or killed that I don't have on here. That's not the context, but I'm just trying to give you some data or some background. The Woolsey Fire started Thomas Fire was in Ventura County. Woolsey Fire is in Los Angeles County. Somewhat of the Malibu, inland, Chatsworth area for us, for context, if you know the area. Started on November 8th. Once again, late in the year. Almost 97,000 acres. It destroyed 1,643 structures. 3 civilian fatalities. The Station Fire. That one's a big one for especially Los Angeles County guys because we had 2 firefighter fatalities. That's the one still stings. That happened, started on August 26th, 2009. Approximately 161,000 acres, and it destroyed 89 homes and 120 other structures. And like I said, we had the 2 firefighter fatalities, Captain Ted Hall, firefighter specialist Arnie Quinones. That was a rough time still for us as a department. We had the Sand Fire, which started on July 22nd, 2016. So to us, a summer fire that goes big is kind of normal. We kind of expect it. But that one, as big as it might have been or how much it destroyed, held at approximately 42,000 acres, 18 structures destroyed, but again, 2 civilian deaths. And then we had the Route Fire. Occurred on 9/11, 2001. up the 5 freeway in Los Angeles County, U.S. Forest Service area, somewhere there, 464 acres. And you're going, well, what's significant about that? Well, it's not necessarily the acreage and everything. There wasn't any structures that I'm aware of that were destroyed. The biggest issue we had was weather, topography, and maybe tactics. I'm not even going to touch it. That we had a major near miss of a large amount of firefighters. So if you want to see that video, you might have already seen it or you remember it. You have LA County and U.S. Forest Service firefighters that get kind of caught. Not kind of. They get caught. And there's video of just a massive amount of group of guys trying to stuff into the cab of a Type 3 fire engine. You can definitely look it up on YouTube and you can see what I'm talking about. The biggest part you can take out of that is just that large amount of a near miss of firefighters. But also you're kind of more for the context of what can happen and how quick it can happen. And then again, less than a year later, on 8/31 of 2022, we had a route fire again, route fire 2. And the only reason I have this one in here is because it burned about just over 5,000 acres. 2 structures were destroyed, but we had 7 firefighter injuries, mostly heat related. And the reason I bring that one and put it in here is, guess who was the initial person on scene with the Forest Service when that incident happened? Yours truly. And the reason I bring it up is not say, hey, look at me, I'm awesome, I was on this fire. The context of it is, it was a super hot day. I think it was 110. Dry as all hell. You were just waiting to figure out where the fire was going to happen. And I happened to be working outside of my normal station, in my same battalion, but at a different station where we cover a large amount of the Interstate 5 freeway. And this fire started. We went to lunch early on purpose because we knew it was going to be hot. Let's get some food in. I think it was 11 or 11:15. And just as we're walking in the sandwich shop to get our sandwich, we had picked it up. We come out and my engineer, the driver, was monitoring the Forest Service radio and heard them put out the call. So the point of it is it went big. We had 7 injuries, all mostly heat related. And the reason I bring it up is when you're on these type incidents, and you start to think that you have all this other knowledge in your head of fires you've been on or fires you've studied, and you start talking about firefighter deaths and civilian deaths, you're not so much worried about the weeds burning up, right? We always comment it's just weeds, it's going to grow back. But when you're actually the first in IC and it's getting later in the day and this thing's going big, and now you hear people dropping out and ambulances being requested and paramedic units needed for our own people, it starts to weigh heavy on you that did you do the right thing? And I remember feeling that. I remember hoping, I hope nobody dies today, because if they did, it's going to weigh on me. And you kind of get concerned that something's going to happen, and it was because you didn't do something tactically right. There was something you could have done better to get. And I know that's kind of a stretch maybe, but I'm telling you, it rattles around in your head. So not only will I talk about some of what happened in the Eaton fire and our experience, but maybe some things that can help you to prepare. And that's pretty much all this episode is going to be about. So with those backgrounds, I'll give you what the Eaton fire. It started on, like I said, January 7th of this year, approximately 6:15 in the evening. We had already known that there was going to be massive winds coming, the Santa Ana winds. And we know, right? Everybody monitors the weather. We're aware of all these things. And as soon as that gets brought up, we go, oh, we've all experienced this. And they can be pretty treacherous. But this one was getting dialed up pretty well, where we're talking 60, 80, 100 mile an hour winds. Can't remember the last time I personally have experienced that. Like, they can get going pretty good, and what's the difference between 40 and 50 when you're fighting fire or just on your day off even? But when you're talking 60, 80, and 100, it almost is unrealistic feeling. Not to say that nobody's lying, but you're kind of going, really? 100 miles an hour? I don't know. I've been on this earth almost 50 years. I'm going to count down to 50 this summer. And I do remember days, I've grown up my whole life here. So I do remember days of being super windy and having these down power lines and things like that. But with nearly 25 years on the job, I can't remember a time where we've had 100-mile-an-hour winds. But you kind of just go, okay, it's not going to change my program of what I'm going to do to get ready, but it might change how these incidents develop. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Palisades fire, same day. So if you've been watching the news and you're kind of looking at it and you're going, yeah, 2 major incidents in Los Angeles County proper, one LA City, one LA County, but still in the vicinity, all at once within the same day. The Palisades fire started on the same day at 10:30 in the morning. And with these other numbers, I'm just giving you preliminary numbers that I pulled off. This thing could have changed up or down, but it doesn't really change the amount of destruction that we're talking about. Palisades fire, as of the time I started collecting this information, 6,831 structures destroyed. That's residential and commercial. Almost 7,000 structures. With nearly 1,000 damaged, residential and commercial, and 12 confirmed fatalities with potential for more. There was 3 civilian injuries, 1 firefighter injury, but that's there could be more that didn't get reported. I'm just giving you the data. Same day, 6:15 in the evening, Eaton fire. As of right now, 14,000 acres, just a little over that, with nearly 9,500 structures combined. That's residential and commercial destroyed. Another 1,000 damaged. That's structure, residential, commercial. 17 confirmed deaths with the potential for more. 9 firefighter injuries. And that incident, when I first typed this up, was still active. That was a few weeks ago. It's not currently necessarily active like it was, but I'm just giving you the amount or the enormous gravity of this incident. Now, as the beginning of this thing, when I talked about we started asking for help and we started getting it from everywhere, including internationally, that's huge, right? So the morning, I remember I was working that day. We came in my regular shift on January 7th, left the house in the morning, did my normal thing, knowing that we'll probably get a fire today somewhere, or we could end up somewhere, and just kind of rattling around your head. Basically, it's not a normal day. You're starting to think a little more heightened. And it had been building up too for a day or so with the winds slowly picking up. And then we're going about our routine, kind of planning out the day, do our normal lineup, talk about the weather, make sure everybody's ready to go. My engine is a strike team engine, so we're assigned to a strike team, meaning 5 engines from my area get grouped together. It's already pre-planned, but we're a third priority. If you look at it and everything was just a normal day, we're a third priority strike team. We're not a major, we don't go out right away because of the area that I currently work in. Has pretty significant risk potential as well. So they don't necessarily like to send us out immediately when people need help, which makes sense. There's more to it than that, but you get the gist. So we're watching, and then all of a sudden, we're getting, we're already through our day. We're already through lineup, workout. Everybody's clean, ready to go, dressed. Kind of make sure, double check the rig, just a little more elevated with making sure we're dialed in, which we should always do every day. But those days where you're like, something's going to happen. Let's make sure we're really, really dialed in. So some of that's going down, and fire breaks out. The Palisades fire, it's already on the news immediately because the news is waiting for this to happen. It's almost like I'm not saying that the news is encouraging it for it to happen, but they're just waiting, right? It's going to happen. So a Palisades fire starts, and we're watching it on the news. And now we're kind of ramped up because we're seeing structures get lost. Winds are really cranking already at 10:30. And it's pretty far from where we're at, but not terrible. It's reachable for sure. But I know what's going to happen, or we know what's going to happen. They're not going to send us right away because it's 10:30 in the morning on the first day of this major wind event. We got to cover our jurisdiction as well, but we do send resources from within my department out to help. We had pre-staged equipment. Oh, let me back up. First thing, right? We have shift change at 7. Officially, it's at 8, but between 6:30 and 7, there's a lot of shift change going on, moving around throughout the whole county fire department that we work for. At about 7:10 or so, all the stations are toned out and nobody is to go home. I distinctly remember this, and I remember going back and looking at my email because I keep that. And it was, nobody's going home. Pump the brakes. We got to make sure we've staffed enough, which they had already pre-staffed, pre-planned, had a plan already before this morning happened. But looking at how things had developed, they slammed the door on anybody going home and saying, hold on, let's make sure all our bases are covered. So now you have approximately 2/3 of the department already reachable. You had the off-going shift and the oncoming shift throughout the whole county fire department. Now that's not a clean 2/3, obviously, because you got people working multiple days and however it goes. So they held everybody to make sure that we staffed enough, and then staffed every remaining piece of apparatus we had to make sure that everything was as covered as we could. And then it'll get muddied because I can't remember all of it. But it got to a point where everybody was on telephone standby. So, I mean, we all have pretty much our phones strapped to us at all times. But you needed to be able to come back to work. But at the same time, nobody was allowed to leave until we staffed. So the 1/3 of the other shift that was at home needed to be contacted to say, hey, have your phone near you. If everything goes to hell, you're going to be coming into work too. So you can understand the gravity of what I'm explaining. Things get handled, staffed, and then I'm trying to remember, I'll muddy it because I can't remember if at a certain point that morning we released people after we had everything staffed. I don't remember we were excessive. I just remember staffing everything to the hilt, and then people were released. And then that evening, all hell broke loose. We got put on the 3rd alarm to go to Eaton Fire from Santa Clarita. It's a little bit of a drive. It's about 35-minute, 40-minute drive. But being on the 3rd alarm with multiple other agencies going, we were in the midst of it pretty soon after the incident started. And when we rolled up, we were already in the midst of structures on fire, convalescent hospitals being impacted, a vacant hospital that used to be in the area that now used for filming. A good amount of those commercial buildings were on fire. So not only did you have a brush fire, but you had all of a sudden a conflagration of just multiple houses. And if you've worked in Southern California and you've been on for a little bit, or maybe even if you haven't, but you've been on brush fires where you've seen houses burn, it happens. It's not ideal. Like I said earlier, we don't want that to happen. But when you're seeing whole blocks on fire, when you pull up within a few hours, not even 2 hours of the incident happening, it's not a good feeling. A feeling of, oh boy, are we ready for this? So let me look at my notes here to make sure I don't get too far off track. And so for a little bit more of a geographical understanding of how Los Angeles is set up, I mean, you can see it on a map, but it's not like you see where we have houses mixed in amongst forest. It's not a forest area. It's desert with brush, and then houses that are up in hills, and just, you'd have to look at pictures. I mean, it's nothing outrageous, but it's not like you have houses amongst tall forest trees necessarily. I mean, we have areas like that, but that's not the area we're affected. We're talking just a standard neighborhood. Like you could just say this is small town USA anywhere for the most part. But when you add the wind and age of structures, all of our houses are pretty close to each other. You know, it's not like they're really spread out, but that's normal for a large city. You're just adding all these other factors that happen, and then boom, they're off to the races, right? It's just the way houses are built. We have raised foundations, so the houses can be up off the ground with access underneath that allows embers to get under attic space. It's just crazy, right? But you're also not expecting 100-mile-an-hour winds, embers to be thrown everywhere, and just the amount of structures that were involved from the beginning. So, like I said earlier, we try to prep ourselves by saying it's one of those days. It's not if, but when. One of those type days where you know there's going to be a fire, and just where is it going to be? And you can blame it on whatever you want to blame it on. I think I know a good amount of it, but I'm not going to divulge it on here of why these things keep happening. But, you know, I don't have an answer of what happened, or I'm not even going to touch that subject, but fires happen. That's what we're here for. You're just waiting to see where it's going to be and how involved you're going to be, or what your piece is going to be of that. Probability of ignition, when you look at that, and it's basically 100. So the potential for ignition, or the probability, when it's 100, we jokingly say things like, all it's going to take is a mouse to fart and there's going to be a brush fire somewhere in this area. I currently work in Santa Clarita. It's part of northern Los Angeles County. Another thing that if you're from the area, you understand, but if you're not, we have a major highway that goes through Interstate 5, pretty much goes all north and south of California, and a huge area, massive amount of traffic that goes through. And a lot of it, once you get out of the city of Santa Clarita, is a large stretch all the way to the Kern County line that's all brush and great, huge elevation change. A lot of semi-truck fires that happen, either going up because they get overheated, coming down, smoking their brakes. That's kind of like our biggest threat. But we have large areas that have hills everywhere that has brush on it. And I live in one of those housing tract areas where we do a pretty good job of having green belts around, but you're still surrounded by brush. I have a major canyon area that is on just over the hill from my house. It's kind of standard. All like lightweight construction houses built for the most part. They're really close to each other. So the potential for exposures and just one house after the other is pretty big. That's kind of normal for this area. For the fire department wise, it's the city of Santa Clarita is 2 battalions, approximately 17 stations or so. And it's closing in on about 300,000 people. So it's definitely residential, busy with commercial, industrial, all kinds of just your normal average. You can change the name to whatever city. Might be something similar that you're used to. I wouldn't say we're burning houses down every day, because we're not as far as structure fires, but we get our fair share. Nothing crazy and nothing, it's nothing outrageous, nothing to write about. But when you work in this area, you're also a big part of the brush component. So we're kind of dual purpose on our fire department, where we're structure, and we also practice a lot for brush fires because they happen a lot. And a good amount of the time, they're right up against houses. So we have a lot to deal with when it comes to, we have this added component that we really try to focus on as far as brush fires and mitigating and how we do things. So there's a lot going with that. I'm not going to say we're experts, quote unquote experts, but we do a pretty good job. And we focus a lot on, and going back to what this new captains that are getting promoted or in the testing process, there is a massive component on that. And anybody in our department, and if you work for our department, if you're one of those where you're like, oh, I'm just never going to bid to a spot like that, or I'm not really a brush guy, you can't say that working for us, because you can get moved around this whole department. Other than if you're working on a ladder truck. But I'll tell you this, on the Eaton fire, guess what was mixed amongst on the brush units? Ladder trucks, because we were throwing everything we needed to at it because of the structures that were involved. So remember, even with that, and yes, hopefully this never happens again, but the potential is huge for it to happen again. Yeah, I understand if you're not going to bid to a spot like that, but you could promote into one. You could take an overtime in an area like that. So it's not really acceptable if you work for LA County to say, I'm not really a brush guy, because it is a huge component. And if you try to shy away from it, or at least not even try to understand a little bit of it, you're doing yourself a disservice, because there's going to be a point where you're going to get caught in the middle of it. And I'm going to experience, or with this recent experience, some of you might have that already happen to you. So as far as my engine company, I work on the west side of Santa Clarita, split the battalion. The battalions are split down the middle. basically east and west, and kind of down in the middle of the town area, more of a hub of town. But we have a ladder truck or a truck company at my station, so which allows us to be moved up if needed to cover other areas. So we still have some apparatus that's in the station. So we're one of the first rigs that gets moved up. The reason I work where I'm at now, one, yes, it's convenient because I'm close to home. I'm not going to say, oh, I did all that in the past, but I worked busy houses far from where I'm at, very specific areas to train myself and to be around people for a reason. And now at this chapter of my life, it's time for me to be a little closer to home, but I'm also dealing with this massive brush component that's even somewhat consistently newer for me. Granted, I've been at my spot for a few years now, but the reason I stay where I'm at is we're pretty much on every first alarm brush fire in Santa Clarita. We actually get on a decent amount. But the other component of it is if we're not on the first alarm, we're already getting moved up because we have the ladder truck to cover our area. We're already getting moved up or moving towards and backfilling a station that's affected by that incident, whether it's residential or brush. And then we're moving to cover one of those areas. And a lot of times if it goes to a second alarm, we're already on it because we're moving towards that as coverage anyway. You can see my point. So another good reason to be where I'm at this specific station, you kind of get sucked into the middle of, and you're kind of, by just the way it's set up, you get pretty good opportunities. Let's see. So what it trains you to do is, even if you don't get picked up on the second alarm, or they're going to handle it with the first alarm, but you're going to cover their area for a while, you're moving to an area that you're not consistently used to. And this could happen. This is not anything specific to us. I'm sure this happens to most of you that are listening. You get moved around to provide coverage until those units come back and they kick you loose. But for a while, you could be there for a while. Hour, 30 minutes, hour, couple hours. Who knows? For a while, we were having so many fires. Over the summer, we were getting moved up for almost 24-hour periods to cover areas because it was just consistently the way it happened. But on average, a couple hours. The reality is you could have another incident happen in that district that you're covering now, and you're kind of just sitting there going, we're just moved up. We'll be here for a couple hours and we'll get out of here. You need to think a little differently as far as, okay, where am I at? What's specific to this area? And what little knowledge. I'm only talking about spending 5-10 minutes to kind of just familiarize yourself with what's going on in the area. You don't just want to go plop it down in the chair and be like, well, I'm good. I'll figure it out. Yeah, you can figure it out. I'm just talking about being specific to that area if you haven't worked there before. So how we get around that is we have move-up company books. Not only is it a remote for the garage door or the apparatus door, but it's also a book that's an emergency information file that you look up and you kind of just skim through and see what major hazards they have, what target hazards they have, information specific to their area, if you don't already know it. But it is interesting to kind of just look. And then for us, we have pretty good air support. So we have helicopters, helispot that we have to assign on a brush fire, a place for a helicopter to land to be filled with water. And another thing for us is to just kind of familiarize yourself with those, because we have nighttime and daytime ones. We have priority ones that are better for certain things. So it's just spending a few minutes, however that might look for your department, just familiarizing yourself while you're moved up to just feel a little bit more comfortable. Then you can go about eating your lunch, or it's the middle of the night, closing your eyes a little bit and waiting to get released. That's all reality. But just spend a little bit of time. That's going to make you a better company officer, a better leader. It shows your crew that you're kind of focused on paying attention, ultimately. So that's a good thing to do. But how do we get on these days that are extreme? Whether it's Santa Ana winds in Southern California, it's rain, snow, potential hurricanes or tornadoes, depending on where you work. I know all of you have this threats that come through your area. Now, I don't even want to talk about earthquakes with Southern California because you try to be prepared for those, but those are ones that you can't even see coming. That's kind of a reactionary thing for sure. And we have things in place for that. It's not as frequent as, say, brush fires, but how do we all-encompassing, when we're talking about hazards that are big that we can kind of see coming, how do we do that? Well, always start as the individual, not only as yourself as a company officer, but potential company officer or you as a firefighter. It doesn't matter. Get yourself dialed in. So you're not holding everybody up while you're trying to figure your stuff out, or just kind of nonchalantly, you're like, it's no big deal, I'll figure it out. Always be dialed in, right? We do a really good job of doing that on the daily. So taking care of yourself, your PPE, leading up to it, just kind of pre-planning for things where you're like, ooh, what happens if we're gone for hours or days or weeks? Some departments are really good at it because that's how they operate. For us, CAL FIRE and the U.S. Forest Service, they're probably the best at that. And we do a pretty good job too, because we have strike teams that go far. But I'm talking about being dialed in to be gone for weeks. So you have your bags that are all set to where you can be gone. But I'm also talking about, are you physically fit and ready to go? Because you could be up for multiple hours, if not days. What do you have to take care of yourself? So we're still kind of, I wouldn't say struggling, but we're still kind of trying to get everybody on the same page with understanding. As a single engine company for a brush incident, you need to be able to take care of yourself for 24 up to 72 hours. That's reality. And that's as a unit. Basically what I'm saying is you shouldn't be looking around in a few hours and going, where's the food? Who's bringing us food? Self-sufficient for 24 to up to 72 hours. Whether that's MREs, snacks, and things you already have pre-packed. I love coffee, so I'm sure a good amount of you do too. We have our own coffee jet boil thing set up so we can take care of ourselves that way, because I think what happens, when you can have those little creature comforts, you're not freezing cold, you're not dying of heat, you're not hungry, you're not thirsty, and you have a coffee or whatever it might be that helps you, your motivation and your fortitude to push forward is pretty good, right? So on these days where there is extreme and you're basically, like for us, we're just waiting for a brush fire to happen. We have the mentality of we could be gone for a whole day, the rest of the shift, a whole 24 hours, 3 days on our own, and then leading into 5, 6, 7, up to 14, up to 21 days, depending on how nutty we are or what piece of apparatus we're on. You got to have that mindset. Do I have everything dialed in? Phone chargers, phone, wallet, whatever you need to be able to just be put on an incident and be gone. We could spend a whole episode on that, but I'm not going to. I'm just making you aware of things you might already be aware of or seen, but I'm just putting it out there. Your physical fitness. Obviously, you can't all of a sudden go, well, it's pretty hot today, I should get myself dialed in physically. Now, that's something that you need to be working on the daily. And I'm talking to myself here as well. You know, it's a functional athlete. I've heard that term used before. It's not my own term. Functional athlete. So you're working at a marathon pace as well as a sprint. You know, it depends on what kind of incident you're having. So you just have to be one of those. You get yourself dialed in physically, however works for you, that you can handle both. That you can go at a marathon pace because you're going to be on these incidents, brush fires at 100 degrees, 2 hours to 12 hours, depending on what it might be, or these straight up sprints, right? House fire, residential, boom, boom, boom. We go 100 miles an hour from 0 to 100, and we kind of just functionally operate on how to make that work. So however you see fit to do that physical fitness wise. And then, of course, listening to your body. There's going to be times where you're just sheer exhaustion, and you're trying to figure out how to recuperate and what works for you and foods and all. That's not this show. I'm just saying, be aware of it. Okay, so let's see here. We're talking about physical fitness, getting our stuff ready, just kind of being ready for these big incidents. Well, that's just talking about being ready as you as the individual. Now, if we're talking this project or this podcast is about company officers or soon to be, or you're thinking about it. So I also want to talk about tactically, what do you need to do? So for us, it's running an incident, right? Your job potentially is most likely you're going to be first on scene, or at some point in your career, you're going to be first on scene, and you're going to be running this incident until the battalion chief or whatever level you have comes and takes it. And sometimes they don't take these incidents right away. It just depends on how you work. So I'm not even going to talk about that. But how do you get yourself ready to manage or run an incident? Well, it's practice. It's practice. It's understanding your policies, SOPs, SOGs, experience. I'm always going to rely on the fact of experience. And I'm talking about experience in your lower ranks before you're promoted or before you promote, and seeing those sets and reps of actually being on those incidents of one, running it, but also what you're asking other resources to do because you've been in that position and you know as you give out tactics and jobs to people about what that actually entails. So a little bit, I wouldn't say elementary, but I'm talking down to the level of physically doing these jobs. But as far as running an incident and putting resources to work, it's not an exact science with us, but for first alarm brush in LA County, as far as the total amount of resources, there's 7 engine companies assigned to it, and then multiple other resources. It's somewhere in the vicinity between 24, 27 pieces of apparatus that are coming at you on your first alarm, waiting for you to put them to work. Now, you may not get to all 24, 27, and we have areas where we have multiple agencies coming in, and depending on whose area it is, you may be putting those resources to work. That's a whole other operation, and you might have something similar in your department. But you need to be able to handle the first big group. Eventually, you should be able to put all the resources that are coming at you on a first alarm to work without any support. That would be your ultimate goal. We try to train our guys after some time to even get down to the second alarm and putting resources to work at the captain level. Now, that's time and that's practice and that's experience. But if we can just start at getting you to get all your first alarm resources put in play, and I'm specifically talking about brush fires right now, and not just ones that it's just vegetation and you kind of can put things together and you have time. I'm talking about that, and then also ramping it up where you have structures involved and just a varying degree of resources. So it's practice, 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 and digging in and asking people, finding your mentor. You've probably heard it enough on the other episodes where I'm talking about finding that mentor who has experienced that. And what did they do? Where did they mess up? What do they learn from those mistakes and constantly try to not repeat? A lot of that. There's a lot going on. And this isn't a podcast on brush fires. I'm talking about just I'm kind of going off the rails a tiny bit here, but more so just kind of what you can aim for also, not just talking at you, but giving you something to walk away with that maybe you can reinforce or shoot towards trying to get to. I know I talked about at the beginning that I was going to say, well, what did we do at the Eaton Fire as far as our engine company? Well, I talked about it a little bit. We got put on the third alarm, right? We check in with staging, and they put us to work within the first few minutes, just trying to keep all the resources wrangled. And it was just immediate. Got an assignment, who we're working for, where to meet them, meet with that person, that task force leader, find out what they need and what's already in play, trying to gather all that information gathering. At the same time, all your spidey senses are showing you everything, right? What you see, what you hear, data collection, just trying to put it all together while you have multiple houses on fire, winds ripping, and you're just trying to get out in front of this thing and make the best decision possible. In these extreme situations, your options, I guess, is stay in communication as best you can, obviously. Make sure you're on the right comms channels, check in with who you need to check in with, get as much information as you can from that person, try to figure out goals and objectives, and then you go to work. And we have an acronym in our department, and it's nothing like it's out extreme or extraordinary, but tier, take initiative, engage, and report. Those are things that you're going to do. You get that bit of information, and then you're pretty much set loose to try to figure out and do the best that you can while reporting back when you can. But actually, in that first couple hours, there was very minimal communication as far as checking in and telling them what we're doing, because it was just difficult trying to get our resources wrapped around something. We were just all trying to go to work. And at the engine company levels, working amongst each other then and reporting back to our supervisor. That was the best that we were able to do. And just trying to cut it off or prevent measures or do things to houses to keep them from burning and hopefully stand still as we leave, stand on their own, that they wouldn't be impacted as soon as we left. That was hours and hours of doing that. And I remember coming back. We were there for basically one operational period. So from the time the morning of our shift to the time we got there to the following afternoon at 3, we were up just going to work, trying to do all this stuff. And when I got back, after we got relieved and we moved things around and things got kind of jostled around and changed and whatever, when we came back, we weren't leaving. So the majority of our department was stuck at work for a week, 10, even 2 weeks at work, backfilling stations and equipment and just all kinds of stuff to reinforce all the resources we had out. And I remember talking to one captain and he asked, well, did you ever feel like you were going to die? And you kind of think about it and you go, I didn't feel like that was going to happen, but I had the heightened alert that you really, really had to pay attention to what was going on. And we were fortunate that that didn't happen to anyone. There were a lot of down power lines, a lot of hazards, but that's the environment we operate in on the daily anyway. It was just more of you're concerned for yourself and your safety, but you add the darkness, the wind, multiple houses on fire, power lines everywhere, just the norm that we're used to, just on an elevated level, and trying to make good decisions. A lot of times we get lucky, and that didn't happen, fortunately. There was a lot of destruction. Okay, so as we wrap up here, and we could go on for forever with this stuff, but I'm always going to touch on a leadership component. And a lot of times these major incidents bring out the level of leader that you are or where you're at, or expose you to other leaders working in a dynamic environment where you see a lot of those people at once, like a massive amount of people trying to quell an incident that's huge. You see multiple angles of leadership and examples of leadership that you can see it happening, but you end up processing it days and weeks later, remembering things or having conversations with people afterwards about what made you think about this, or what did you do here, or why would you do this, or having those straightforward conversations really helps you to develop you as a leader as well. You could get thrown into that on day one of being a captain in an environment like that. And where are you at baseline wise? Well, this isn't even going to scratch the surface as far as being a leader, but these big incidents bring out not only tactically what kind of leader you are, but how you take care of your people, how forward thinking you are about working into long operational periods, and really how you're going to take care of your people as these major incidents develop that just go longer and longer and longer, and you're pushing your people more and more and more. It's not just, can you tactically make the right decisions? It's, are you making safe decisions based on you reading your people as well and yourself? Are you being honest with your crew about yourself when you say, hey, I'm thinking this, what do you guys think here? There seems to be a lot of that on these major incidents where it's less of a dictatorship and more of a conversation, but definitely there's going to be times where you need to say, this is what we're doing. So it just intensifies on these major incidents. Let's see. So what can we do? How can you make yourself a better leader? Well, there's all kinds of things, right? Like I said, basically I learned a lot from experience, just being around good leaders, asking questions, and then trying to create my own way of doing things as well. And you're going to do things the way that you think is right and your experiences, and you're going to stumble and you're going to fail and you're going to try something and go, that didn't work. But the biggest piece I can find that has always done me right is communication. Communicate to people what's going on, what you're thinking, what information you're given, right? So like we go have a quick meeting with your task force leader or your strike team leader or something. You need to come back and disseminate that information to your people and giving them that information. So I wrote down a few words. Now, obviously aren't the only words that describe this type of leadership or things that you should keep in mind as we all constantly try to make ourselves better leaders. But first off, it takes time to develop your style. And you have daily opportunities just on a regular shift. Regular, I'm putting air quotes, a regular shift. You have these daily opportunities to prove yourself to yourself and to your crew about what kind of leader you are and what kind of leader you're becoming and what kind of legacy, if you want to call it that, you're leaving behind. And remember that you're daily having impacts on the people that you work with, good or bad. But some of the words that I'm thinking in my head as I wrote these things down were, you're consistent. It's not Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. What are we going to get that day type? Oh boy, what kind of boss do we have today? Consistency. You're fair, meaning you're fair to the crew when they deserve to be rewarded and when you're at the point where you're protecting them from themselves. And a lot of that comes through communication as well, not just a heavy hand of saying, no, that's the way it's going to be, or no, with no explanation. So a fairness, stable and rational. This kind of goes with the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. You're engaged. How engaged are you daily with your crew? Are you the type that comes to lineup, does the minimum, and then if your crew needs you, they know to go look in your dorm or in the office, right? That's the secret hiding place. As a company officer, there's stuff that needs to get done, but it's very easy for us to hide in the office and justify it by saying, I got a lot of paperwork to do. So how engaged are you? Just getting out and walking the floor, walking the firehouse, seeing what's going on. Listening, but also giving your people their distance from you as well. Do you have clear-cut expectations? I've had other previous episodes that you can go back and I'll try to link them later on in the notes if I remember, but expectations, setting the expectation. That's pretty self-explanatory. There's more to it, but I don't want to rehash it here necessarily. And do your people see you working to get better? Do they see you having conversations with other captains and BCs and trying to learn to get better? Do they see you studying reference material, taking classes, hear your conversations of you listening to podcasts or reading books or whatever it is that helps you become a better leader? Do they see you engage in trying to get better? Do you admit your mistakes when you're wrong? Nothing quells or straightens people's opinion out on you when you admit your mistakes and you kind of get out in front of it. Yep, I screwed that up. I was thinking this. I thought this would happen. I messed that up. Okay, move on. Let's try to fix it. Now, if you're constantly leaning on just admitting your mistakes and you use that as a crutch to why you can be a screw up, that's not what I'm saying. But every once in a while, you're going to step in a pile of dog crap and you're going to have to admit you're wrong. And how many of us like to admit we're wrong? And if you're married, enough said. How many times do we like to admit we're wrong? But it's almost good practice to even do it. No, it's not almost. It's good practice to do the same thing at home. I'm learning that with my kids. I've been married for a little bit now. And when you mess up, you mess up. As soon as you admit it and just kind of move on and work through it, the better it becomes. That's all I'm going to say about that. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. A lot of these things, it's like I'm talking to myself. I literally am talking to myself, sitting in an office by myself. But one other thing, are you humble? Are you humble that you can take the praise that you deserve, but you don't just run with it and act like you're awesome, right? So you have that touch of humbleness. And then, even though this is, what do you want to call it? I can't even think of the term right now. It's late. You got to look the part. You got to look the part. You can't be a hot mess. That's what I'm saying. This is shallow. I should say it's shallow. You can't look like a pile of crap and then expect people to respect you. Just looking the part sets you off on the right foot. So maybe I should put looking the part at the very beginning, because that's the first thing we see, right? Okay, so maybe not in order, but there you go. Okay, so lessons learned, being prepared as best you can on the daily basis, but on those days where you really need to focus and go, okay, something is different, whether it's weather, time of the year, just things that are going on in your environment. You kind of know those days where you're like, something's going to happen today. I should dial up my attentiveness to getting dialed in and clear on everything. You should always be sharp on the daily. But you know what I'm talking about. Those days where it seems like something's going to happen. So getting ready for that. Constant, clear communication. Tell your people what's going on. Gather as much information as you can. Constantly working on that communication skill. And then on these big incidents, when I was saying that the question was, did I feel like I was going to die? And I explained, not necessarily, but there was a lot more degrees of power lines downs and trees and straight up burnout buildings and explosions. I don't know what the hell was going on, but there was just massive explosion sounds going on around us throughout the night and the next day. Obviously I know it's car tires and things that people keep in their homes and propane tanks and all this stuff that are off gassing and just, damn, dude. But that was actually got what little bit of hair left I have on my head standing up because of just the concussion sound. And it was crazy. So you kind of look around for a second, like, what the hell just happened? So with that, slowing down in those environments where you are at a marathon pace and you're at a major incident that's going down and you got buildings burning all around you, slow it down for a second and figure out what the heck's going on. And then for those who were involved or have been involved in something similar in the past, it's just hard to pick those winners versus losers. I put in quotes because nobody's structure is a loser, but you know what I'm saying? When it's involved and you can't do anything and you got to pick the next one or try to keep it off of the next one, that is a tough thing to try to make those decisions and make the right decision. And it's going to ride with you for a while where you try to go, did we do everything the best we could? And try not to overextend yourself. Call for help early. Whether it's a first alarm brush fire and you think you got it and you almost do, but there's just a couple of things, pull the second alarm. Ask for more help in your division. Whatever it may be. Remember, you got that crew working behind you and you're pushing them hard. And remember those times where you were in their seat and you're going, damn, I wish we had some more help. So try to always keep that balanced with calling for help early. And then something that I like to do, it's kind of nerdish, I guess, but doing a little history review. I love history as it is anyway in general, but reading about old fires and incidents and being a student of the craft, taking classes, reading books, watching videos about specific fires and going back and reviewing, especially these big brush conflagrations. It doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Just whatever that you can get your hands on to kind of just be a student of the craft and learn, it's just going to help you in the future. And it doesn't need to be something you do all the time that's exclusively what you read or what you listen to or what you watch. I do believe in a separation and always not being involved so much, but you know what I'm saying? Going back and just doing a history review so we don't have the history repeats itself thing. Okay, well, I think I've yacked at you enough. First time back in a while and went a little longer than I thought this would actually be. Like I said, I have the next 4 episodes written. It's just up to me to jump on it and keep pushing it out consistently. If you've been around for a minute, you know all the handles. We're on Instagram as the Fire Officer Project. All these shows and podcasts and stuff can be found on Apple and Spotify and amongst others. I recently just added it to YouTube. So if you like to listen to things on YouTube, then right now it's just the audio only on YouTube. I don't do anything with video yet, but I've at least programmed it in or dropped it in or opened a channel up as the Fire Officer Project on YouTube. So if that's kind of your platform you like, you can switch over to that. My ultimate goal too is to do some live Q&As on Instagram and kind of schedule those out and just have fun with it, engage a little more. And if you're looking at needing or wanting to share your experience with us eating fire or any of that stuff, reach out to me. There's a link on Instagram to all the handles, the website, the email, anything of that nature. You'll find a way to get a hold of me. Do that. Also, if you're looking for some guidance or just have some questions about a promotion that you might be working on, I'm totally open to help or give an opinion or just have a conversation with you. Until next time, keep moving forward and stay safe.